Right, let's get into this now. So complainant Andiswa Mengo has come under more pressure at a judicial conduct tribunal looking into sexual harassment claims against the Eastern Cape Judge President Selby Mbenenge. The court secretary accuses the top judge of sending her explicit photos. But Mbenenge's advocate, Moses Kakane, is accusing Mengo of purposefully omitting messages she sent.
That conversation where the respondent says at 1940, I must come and give you a boost.
Yes.
You do not reflect anywhere in your complaint that your answer to that was, when strong to stand on my feet.
Yes, that's correct.
At 1948, as you will see, that conversation as what the respondent, where the respondent says, Kanene, you are tender. You do not reflect in any of your part of your complaint that your answer to this was very.
Yes.
Sikakane also claims that the two had conversations about intimacy, which Mengo omitted from her statement.
You did not reflect that you sent a particular, either a sticker answering the question, you reckon kungangazelwana this week?
The translation of kungangazelwana is, you reckon we can be intimate this week? Yes.
Did not reflect your answer or your statement there which says, sijongane, not ngazelana.
Uyivezanga ke apha kuphepha 1210 impendulo yakho ethi sijongane hayi ukungazelana, which is the direct translation of sijongane, face to face, not intimate. Apa ku 2238 awivezanga nayo le impendulo yakho apa ku statement. Yes.
Well, Mengo conceded that she had opportunities to address her concerns with the judge president, but she failed to take them.
When asked ufuna nje ubuhlobo, you did not reflect your answer that you gave three laughing emojis and said azikho mpendulo.
Ufuna nje ubuhlobo in English translated, do you just want friendship? And the translation of azikho mpendulo, there are no answers. Yes.
Can I pause there to see if we can agree that although you did not say this, but at this point too, you could have given him the answer yes, or be straight about what you want and what you don't want?
Yes, I had the opportunity.
Now, this case has sparked debate about consent and the alleged victims' participation in cases of abuse. So we're opening the lines. What are your thoughts on this? Join the conversation via WhatsApp on 072 110 5584 or give us a call 010 594 6010. Let's speak to our panel now. We're joined by Men's Forum founder, Mr. Mbuyiselo Botha, Stellenbosch University professor Amanda Gous, and Brenda Madumise is with Wise for Africa. Also joining the conversation is legal analyst Alton Hart. Everyone, good evening to you, and thank you so much for joining us on what I think is a really important case because it sparked massive conversation in the country. And Mr. Botha, perhaps that's a really great place to start, right?
Yeah.
The conversation that has been sparked in the country, and I think certainly what you take about the debate that's taking place. I don't think we've seen one like this take place in the country around participation in sexual harassment claims.
Well, I think we have not seen them. But what is said, Naledi, and thank you for the invitation. What is said is that I think Andiswa should not be the one who is, put in the platform or the one who has to answer, because, I mean, she is in fact a survivor. I mean, she went through a very tough, this whole process has been very tough. But so where I'm coming from is that, it should not, in fact, we are putting her to, in fact, to answer what ordinarily she should not be in the dock. It's akin to someone who has been raped to actually sit there and either explain or justify why she was violated. So I think for us, for me, the debate and the sad part is also how this whole, how she's been questioned, and it's in fact, as a survivor, she has to, I mean, she's put in a very difficult position and very uncomfortable position, because then she has to explain why the judge has put me through this ordeal. Yeah.
I mean, it's quite something.
But it also, it reinforces, this notion that, women, she let him on. She wanted it. It's the sad part. Even the way, the lining of the question, the questions are in its own very sad. And one understands that Advocate Musi is doing her job, but one has got to also think that what does it say? What message does it say to the country? That in fact, because women who go through this, would actually be of the view that, what's the point? Why do I go there? But also, we have not been able to center the power imbalances. It's something that we have been, very dismissive of. It's as if that, but hold on, she had an opportunity, she had a chance. We don't even ask the question, but the judge, should it not have, occurred on him to say, but you know what? Am I not misusing this position of authority that I have?
That's an interesting point that you're making, because and you talk about the responsibility being on her to explain what happened. And perhaps, Prof, I can bring you in here, because I wonder if what this does is the conversation in the country not being, how South Africans see Mbenenge, but certainly how they view Mengo in all of this. So where a lot of the judgment from South Africans in the public discourse is going.
Absolutely. And so she's actually the one on trial, and she shouldn't be the one on trial. And we've seen this also with the case of Kwezi in the Zuma rape trial. She was the one that had to explain and defend herself. And I think that, what's really overlooked here is the power relationships between the judge president and Mengo. And where there's power involved, women will take different ways of dealing with issues. First, they will sort of go along with it. Then they will start to worry that this is going in the wrong direction. They may, hesitate to say what they want or that they don't want it, because the person that they're dealing with is the person in power, and it's the person that can determine whether they keep or lose their jobs. And the other point I want to make is that consent is not just one action that then means consent for everything that follows. If we go back to the Coco case, right, where the young woman said that she wanted to be intimate, but that she didn't want penetration, and then the penetration happened and she made a rape case. There was a whole issue around consent then. And what it showed is that consent has to be given at specific points in a relationship. So maybe at some point she was participating in this sort of salacious messages, and she was not the only one deleting things. So was he. So the focus is on her because she made the complaint. But that consent doesn't mean she's consented now to everything and every disgusting, disgraceful thing that followed that. And I think this is why the issue of consent here is of a great concern.
You use the word disgusting and disgraceful. This is, Brenda, I'll bring you in here, because here's the reality. I mean, if you're watching it, just the language that is being used and also just the graphic nature of what is being described here, what it does to someone who was sitting on the stand. You know, I think immediately about questioning that we saw just yesterday around, do you, and again, apologies to the viewers if this sounds explicit, but I want to make the example, you know, the question around, do you know his penis? I mean, it's, oh gosh, so difficult to even just say the words, right? Talk to me a little bit about what you've made of just the tone of this tribunal as well.
Sorry. I think for us as Africans, we're exposed to what many victims of gendered violence experience in the courts, at the place of work, where they're no longer victims, but they become the focus. If you remember, for a long time in this country, in many jurisdictions, there was an obsession with, in rape cases, to ask the victim how she was dressed, what was she doing. And so we focused on that person and wanted to talk about her previous relationships, and wanted to come to the conclusion that because she had too many relationships, she was a slut, and we slut shamed her. We had to do away with that kind of questioning, because you literally putting a victim on trial again, so they have to relive the trauma of what they've gone through. For me, what this has done, and I'm hoping that South Africans are beginning to grapple with the realities of when victims of gendered violence come out openly to one out their perpetrators, that we should not, and we should limit our attention to the victim. So we tend to focus on the victim and really hone in on the victim and leave the perpetrator and give that perpetrator a pass, right? So that's the first thing for me, that it's brought it out into the open for those who did not think that it's possible that a judge president can engage in salacious exchanges. That is there. That when we have a study that tells us about the conduct of South African men who tell you that they believe that women must obey them, and comes out of the HSRC study on the prevalence of gender-based violence in this country, what you see is what that study, this confirms what the study is all about, because one thing that we cannot ignore is that power gives authority credibility, right? Power gives it authority, it gives it credibility. The words of judge presidents are more credible than those of the victim, right?
Sure. Yeah.
We doubt her version. We doubt everything that she's saying, because we come from we live in a country that gives that power, that credibility, and gives it authority.
Yeah, very interesting, Brenda. We're going to continue the conversation. In fact, already getting calls, because this has been, I mean, it's such a big debate in the country. 01059460010. We do have Alton Romeo Hart with us, and he's going to give us a legal analysis as well on it, so we can really get, you know, a sense of legally what is it that we're looking at the moment and what's expected to come. But Khapane is called in Johannesburg. Khapane, good evening.
Yes, how are you, ma'am?
I'm well, sir. Thank you so much for calling. What are your thoughts?
Yes, I think there's a procedural unfairness here. This case does not deserve the life that it's got. It was not supposed to be a probe. Are there no procedures at work for unfair labor practice at work?
Are there no?
Labor practices, like if your senior is intimidating you at work, or is using language that is unbecoming, don't you have the right to ask your superior to have a labor case at work? Unfair labor practice? Why should it go to this length of being a probe? What is behind all this? Is there somebody being bribed to accuse or to cost a job of somebody here? Because I don't understand why should this be approved? This is supposed to be a labor case at work.
That's a very interesting point. Thank you so much for that. Yeah.
At work. If you are a certified employee at work, you must go and explain yourself so that your case can be heard.
Yeah. Kgapane, you've raised such an incredibly important point. Thank you so much for that. We're taking more calls, 01059461010. And Alton, I think that's a great one for you to answer, right? Kgapane says there are labor processes that should have resolved this issue. Why did it need to end up going all the way to a tribunal? Perhaps you can answer that. But let's go back to the point in what we've been discussing around procedurally. The focus being on Mengo's testimony. Is that right? And then, of course, we need to get into the issue of consent. But let's start with these two issues first, Alton.
No, indeed. If one looks at it, then it's at the core of this whole inquiry is whether there was consent from Mengo to actually participate in this exchange of these I would say vulgar messages between the two individuals involved. And for me, it's normally when we look at consent in terms of our Sexual Offences and Related Matters Act, consent was always seen as a subjective topic where they look at the perpetrator, and if the perpetrator subjectively believed that consent is given, then he cannot really be sort of found guilty of sexual related offenses. Now, what has happened in the interim is that there was a challenge, a constitutional challenge in the Old Zaga case, where they actually now said that this subjective test that is put to consent should be changed, and the courts have said now they've got 18 months to change it, and it must be objective test. What happened in the Coco case, in the Coco case, Loyiso Coco's case, is that the girl agreed to a certain extent to certain sexual activities, but she made it clear from the get-go that she does not want to lose her virginity. So it means that she consented to certain things, and then after a certain point, she now made it clear that she doesn't want. But now it seems like, and that is where the whole Zaga case is going in, to say, why should the victim always be the one to actually make it explicitly clear that they don't consent? And that's the gray area that we currently have in the law. And you get consent, you can have express and you can have tacit consent. And here, I think they rely on the fact that they say there was tacit consent, in the sense that when Judge Mbenenge sent to Ms. Mengo these disgusting messages or images, she had an opportunity to do something. But obviously you talk about the power imbalances, the power abuse, and also the fear of reprisal and all those things. And you have to look at it holistically to say, was there really consent in this scenario? So you have to look at it, and you can't just sort of narrow it down. What the caller said about labor practices, yes, you can, but it doesn't stop you from actually, because this is a judge. There is the Judicial Service Commission where judges' behavior is reported. So even if she goes to her employers, she can take her employers on to say that you're placing me in a work environment that's not safe for me. But it doesn't stop her from going to the Judicial Service Commission also to lay a complaint against the judge, because the judges are held accountable by the Judicial Service Commission, because their appointment just works different. It's by the president. So if the president doesn't remove a judge, and that can only happen constitutionally, there must be an impeachment hearing and all those type of things before a judge, because a judge is a lifetime appointment, and hence there is that different route that has been taken in this case. Yeah,
I really actually want us to sit on this issue of subjective consent, Elton, because I think it really is at the middle of this, right, in the center of this, in the sense that there's a question around whether or not consent was given willingly by Mengo in the exchanges with Mbenenge. But of course, even if you assume that consent in fact was given, can it also then be taken? We're going to get into that in a moment, but we've got a caller. Zio is calling from Johannesburg. Zio, good evening to you. Thank you so much for calling. Zio, good evening. Zio, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Yes.
Good evening, Naredi.
Good evening. Thank you so much for calling. What are your thoughts?
No, I think, this whole thing can come back as an insult to the gender-based violence in this country, because we have a country which has a lot of problems when we talk about gender-based violence. But again, if we can talk about the complainant, I think she should have stopped him and not show any consent to his, I can say that maybe sexual conversation that he was getting engaged with her. Because somehow I just feel like there was a lot that she was supposed to do to stop the judge to continue with this kind of conversation, but which he didn't. And now, when it comes out and everything is starting to come out, we just feel like maybe there was some promise, maybe the judge had promised her that, you know what, there might be a position that's going to open up, and then he didn't fulfill to that promises, and then she just felt like that she needs to come back with that. But all in all, I just feel like it's going to be a mixed emotion when all is done. But I feel like it is going to be a lesson to individuals that might be going through gender-based violence, that if things like that are happening to our workplace, we shouldn't play along.
Zio, this is what I find interesting, but thank you so much for calling. This is what I find interesting about the point that you've raised. We're having a conversation around she should have. And one of the key questions that we haven't actually talked about here and was raised by the previous caller was he should have or should not have, right? So a lot of the responsibility on the woman. But let's talk about consent, Mr. Bota.
Well, I think here's the problem, when a lady, when you, there's no one size fits all. You know, but when you talk about consent, one has to bear in mind that you're talking about someone who may fear reprisals. That look, if I do not play along, let's assume that if I don't play along, possibilities are that there are consequences. I may lose my job, because you are not talking of an ordinary person. You're talking of someone in a position of power. And I think that's the operative word. Position of power. And if we lose sense of that, then we lose the entire, we lose it. Because it presupposes that, you know, she could stand up to Judge Mbenenge, to stand up and say, you know what, whilst she's mindful that if I do, what's going to happen to me? And this is where, and again, for the one caller spoke about, this is a labor. That's where most of us are missing it. I mean, a lot of companies, both private and public, don't have, a sexual harassment policies. Because for them, this is a nice to have. So until, as a country, we look at it as a must to have, that it's a key in any organization, that, you know what, if you come here, if we employ you, we will make sure that, the judges, we will, or magistrates, will make sure that one of our articles of faith is to talk about sexual harassment. That lady who's the cleaner, that man who's the mechanic, understands it. Also, it's all very well to talk about sexual harassment policy. It may stay there when a lady gets a desk. The point I'm making is that it's important that each and every Dick, Tom, Harry, or Salamina in the workplace understands what does it mean. Whether it's a process that all of us in the company have a buy-in, that you can't just reduce it, that it's an employer, employee type of a labor relations. Because when you do that, you are losing what is essentially this power imbalances.
If we broaden it, right, and you talk about the power imbalance, if we broaden it and we say in a different context, in a different sort of situation, if I have consented, can I change my mind? And we're going to answer that as well on the other side of this short break. Remember, we're taking your call 010-594-6010 and your WhatsApp 072-110-5584. We're back in a moment. Welcome back. We continue with this discussion. This case has sparked debate about consent and alleged victims' participation in the cases of abuse. Of course, we're talking about Andiswa Mengo versus Selby Mbenenge, that tribunal taking place in the matter around sexual harassment claims that have been made by Mengo. Still taking your WhatsApps on 072-110-5584 or give us a call on 010-594-6010. Let's continue with the conversation, but we take a look at some WhatsApps that have come in now. Anonymous from East London says, "Good evening, Naledi. I'm a viewer from Eastern Cape, but I've been following this tribunal from the start. It's very sad, Naledi, that the victim of sexual harassment would be grilled in a way where her emotional state is not even considered in the line of questioning. We must remember that both the respondent and plaintiff are in the same work environment, which could trigger the humiliation of the victim by colleagues in the same environment." And she, of course, in that tribunal did talk about other women that have experienced similar behavior by the judge president. She did talk about that herself in confiding with other women. Let's see another WhatsApp that has come in. "I don't agree with this man in the studio. He must not be seen as biased in his explanation. The lady participated. I knew there would be people to justify her actions. As a nation, we should not be one-sided. They are lies that lady brought in this case. Men are always blamed as women are innocent. We face the case independently. We cannot allow a one-sided manner. Now it means gender is about men as criminals. They were issues of money." Goodness. Okay, Anonymous, thank you so much for that. Swo in Durban says, "I disagree with the notion that the victim is put to be questioned. Remember, she made accusations that must be proven. We also need to be fair to the alleged perpetrator. Many men are also wrongly jailed. The two are adults. They can consent to sexual activity, so any harassment must be proven." Yeah, interesting points there. Okay, well, a lot of calls on this one. Fezitinga's in the Eastern Cape. Fezitinga, good evening.
Good evening, Naledi.
Yes, thank you for calling, sir. What are your thoughts?
Firstly, I just wish to state from the onset that I don't agree with your members of the panel, particularly the man wearing the pink shirt or something, in the sense that here, remember, there is a complaint that has been laid of sexual harassment by Ms. Mengo, and that complaint accuses the JP of impropriety on his part, of sexual misconduct. Remember, this is a man of a strictly highly honorable profession. He has dedicated his entire life into that profession. He knows nothing else except that particular profession in his life. And therefore, now that there is an inquiry that has been set up to interrogate that very same complaint or allegation, you took, this gentleman in your studio, take an offense to that, because what is being done here is to interrogate the facts that have been presented by the complainant. There is an interrogation by the respondent to the extent that there are so dire consequences of impeachment if found guilty. And remember what those consequences are. I cannot even emphasize them. His life is on the line. But if there are inconsistencies and incongruities within the statement of the complainant, then it needs to be very thoroughly canvassed so that we reach an outcome that is favorable. That inquiry is doing fine for me. Why are we projecting the woman as if he is victimized? There is no victim here.
Okay, all right.
We are still proceeding with the inquiry very well.
Okay, Fezitinga, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. Isaac in Johannesburg. Isaac, good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, Isaac, thank you for calling.
Yes,
what are your thoughts?
Yes, my comment is I wanted to say to Mr. Botha earlier, he said if she didn't partake, maybe she was afraid that she might lose her job. I'm saying she has already mentioned that several times in the beginning, said she had to partake because she was afraid that she might actually victimize or end up losing her job. So another thing is, why are they? When she was drafting the what do you call the consent letter, she didn't have actually legal advice to tell her how to frame the discussion. So that is where they actually capitalizing it, because now the very same guy who has actually victimized the lady brought the whole team with a good experts,
Okay.
to help him actually find the loopholes where they can actually, press the lady.
Yep.
Instead, the very same perpetrator, he was the one who was supposed to be sitting on the chair answering all these questions, not the accuser.
Okay, Isaac, that's interesting, and we've heard that point made by some of our panelists earlier. But one of the WhatsApp said, she is the complainant, so she needs to sit in that chair and explain the complaint that she's put forward. And Amanda, I'll give this one to you, Prof, because here's what our WhatsApps have been saying. We have seen women in the past make accusations, to hurt and I say with inverted commas, said perpetrators. So that's something that we have seen before, and that this woman is not innocent, right? So, I mean, what do you make of that very debate?
Well, let me start with the judge president. So here is a man that has, by all accounts, been guilty of this behavior before. When she mentioned it to someone and she said, there's this picture that I got on WhatsApp, the person said to her, does it come from Judge Mbenenge? And because he's well known for that behavior. When she made the complaint, it was said there's been previous complaints against him. She has asked for the judges in that court to attend a mediation session with her, all of them, and it didn't happen. So men are not women's allies. And we see this here tonight in terms of the voice notes and the call-ins, is that she is the one that is to blame here. And this is the problem with sexual harassment. It is always focused on the person who makes the complaint. It's not looked at the behavior of the men. Why is the judge president not on the stand explaining his behavior, telling us why he did what he did? He has a family. How must his family feel about what is actually happening here? So now it's said that, his life's on the line, his job's on the line. So is everybody else who's involved here. The victim's job and life is also on the line. And there are codes of conduct for people to follow. He is a judge president. Surely he knows what is right and what is wrong.
Yeah.
So even if she was participating in it up to a point, no means no. This is the problem in South Africa with gender-based violence, that nobody seems to think that no, and I'm talking about men here, that no means no. Once you can be kissing somebody, you can be cuddling somebody, you can be doing things. If the person says no, then it must stop. And it did not stop.
Yeah.
And I mean, this for me is the issue here.
Okay, Elton, yeah, thanks for that, Prof. Elton. Procedurally, I think that really is going to be the big question. She is the complainant. That's the argument that's being made by one of our viewers, and you can respond to that. And so that's why she's on the podium. But also, I want to get into what we could see then take place next, right? Then if you can perhaps touch on from what we've seen of the case right now, your assessment of, do you think that she will be successful?
No, when one looks at it, then people should understand how our procedural law works in South Africa. We follow an adversarial system. And as much as we want to say that the judge president must be in that seat, if you lodge a complaint, even in domestic violence cases, you as a complainant, you go and you lay a charge or a complaint at the domestic violence office. Then the respondent is given an opportunity to respond, cross-examine, and then respond. So that is the nature of the beast that we're dealing with. Unless we change our legal system, that is how it's going to be. And people should accept that for now. I'm not saying it's right, but I'm saying that's what we have, and we work with it. And obviously, when the legal representatives representing the judge president, they will come and they would want to kick into the credibility of the witness to say that, is she just trying to paint a nice picture of herself and that she's Miss Goody Two Shoes here and she did absolutely nothing wrong? And the judge was the one that was doing everything wrong. And I'm not condoning the actions of the JP, what he did in this instance. There was messages exchanged. And then one needs to also understand that when it comes to consent, consent can be given at the beginning, but in the middle of the process, you can withdraw it. So consent can be withdrawn. And obviously now it speaks to the power imbalances, and then there's fear, coercion, and that imbalance in the powers. But also, I think Professor Gou said that men are not the allies of women. I think that statement that she made was a little bit unfound, because you cannot say that. Yes, there is the majority of perpetrators is men, but there's also men that's actually standing up for females and actually making sure that females get to be heard and gets to be protected. So we shouldn't generalize, because gender-based violence cases is not just from men's side. The majority is still coming from male side, but there's also, I was once in a police station where a man was raped and the police laughed at him. That's why men don't report these cases. So we need to be very careful when we frame certain things, and we need to look at the beast that we're dealing with, which is our justice system, our legal system, is how we package these things and how consent is obtained, how it's withdrawn. And we need to know that you can have it expressly and tacitly. And the test currently in South Africa, as per our legislation, it's subjective, and that's what the courts work with. They've got 18 months to fix it, and I think then we will have a better roll of the dice for female victims. Because even if they participate, it shouldn't be seen as sort of half giving the full consent for what is happening to them.
But in 20 seconds, Elton, and I need to get this from you. Looking at the tribunal and how it's run so far, the chances that she has of success?
No, for me, the thing is, like, there's a strong chance of success because of the behavior. Because apart from what is happening in the evidence, the standards that you hold your judicial officers to, it's a professional ethical standard, and it's in the LPA, it's in the code of conduct of the LPC, that you need to be a respectable character in your role. And that is the tests that they're going to subject the JP to. And as it stands now, he's already said that he did exchange these messages. I'm not looking at what the victim did. I did what he did, and his actions was wrong.
Okay. All right, Brenda, I'll bring you in here. You know, I'm looking at your profile, and I'm seeing how you're talking about you had a baptism of fire of working in an environment full of patriarchy. It's written in your profile, and I thought that there's such an interesting point to raise, because there's also the issue of culture, and by that I don't mean tradition. I mean the culture of the society that we live in. And if you think that in and of itself creates environments where things like this can happen, but you also give legal advice to women. Would you have advised Mengo to go ahead and make the complaint? Do you believe that there's a chance that she could succeed?
You know, we advise women to, those who are willing to speak out, and we support them once they come out and out they are perpetrators. It's not an easy thing to do, precisely because when one victim looks at what Mengo is going through, why would they want to subject themselves to that? And it's majority of many women who really suffer in silence because they don't want to be put through what Mengo has been put through, and we have put women through worse, by the way. So that's one thing. For those that come up, we are available and we support them. What I'm looking at the moment is, I think that what the Judge President's team is doing is to ensure that he does not get to be impeached. So they're hoping for that he will not be found for gross misconduct. He might be found guilty of some misconduct, because already, as Elton has said, he has admitted to all these exchanges that are salacious, that are not becoming of a judge president, right? So what I think is that they're pushing for is that this judge president just receives a warning of some sort, or even a slap on the wrist. And they're going to work very hard to ensure that there is no finding of gross misconduct, because once there is a finding of gross misconduct, then the tribunal is forced to then look at impeachment processes that ends up in parliament and all of that. My sense is that the team that is led by the evidence leader, I think there's enough to find against the judge president, and as I say, I think they're going to gone for a lesser finding so that then he does not lose his benefits as a judge and all of that. It depends on the team that is prosecuting this case, that they're going to go hard to ensure that they get a finding of gross misconduct.
Yeah. When we need to take a short break. When we come back, I'm going to ask our panelists really to talk to us about the lessons that we all take from what we've seen take place in this tribunal, whether you are a man or a woman, a complainant, or the one making the advances. At a colleague, perhaps on the other side of this. Stay with us. Andiswa Mengo versus Judge Selby Mbenenge, keeping the country talking, and of course that debate brewing in the country around consent and alleged victims' participation. We're taking your WhatsApps on 072-110-5584. Let's see some of those WhatsApps that have come in. Anonymous says, Naledi, as emotive as this process is, we should allow the process and evidence to lead us to the objective end, lest we jump before the drum beats and arrive at wrong conclusions. At the moment, we don't know. Anonymous, thank you so much for that. Lifa says, Naledi, legal cases must not be attempted to be understood through emotions. The lady justice is blindfolded. This symbolizes the fact that every accused person is presumed innocent until proven guilty, and every complainant has to prove his or her victimhood. Lifa, thank you so much for that WhatsApp. Let's talk about what we learned from this case. Brenda, I'll let you go first. What complainants and perhaps those that make advances, let's say in a work environment, should be learning from this particular moment?
A couple of things. I mean, I think, on a daily basis, we experience harassment one way or the other as women, as majority being women in this instance. It's they living in a society that does not believe you. Every time you women come up and talk about their lived experiences of abuse, of rape, of sexual assault, violation, you name them, all of them. And until we get to grips with the extent of the problem in this country, where microaggression and believing that we are entitled to women's bodies and we can dictate what they should do, say, and when and how. We're going to continue to be talking at cross purposes as we did today with those who called and believed that the person who complained cannot be believed precisely because they, in their minds, this ordeal has to happen in the way they see it, not how the victim sees it. And that's my problem. We always insert ourselves in the experience of the victim and not understanding what that victim has gone through. And we want to then have our own views and opinions on how she should have behaved, how she should have conducted herself. So she must twerk for us, she must perform for us so that we are comfortable. Because whenever something makes us uncomfortable, we then want to be made comfortable by those who have come out to make us uncomfortable. So we need to continue to make each other uncomfortable with all of these things so that we can come to the solutions and we come to the truth of what we are dealing with as a country.
Okay, I want to take one last caller. Ayanda's in Johannesburg. Ayanda, good evening.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me on the show.
Thanks for calling. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are, I think this case is going to be a very educational case in South Africa, especially in the space of the GBV issues that we are facing in South Africa. And I think it's going to emphasize the issue that has been mentioned previously, but I want to also emphasize on that we as women can relate in whatever way we want and express ourselves in whatever way we want. There shouldn't be an expectation that when a woman is in a conversation or is in a talking state, that is a conclusion that the relationship will end up being sexual. I think that is something that needs to be cleared up, and this case is going to give us a very clear direction and understanding that when a woman is in a talking state does not mean that she should be exposed to content that is violating her, that is demeaning to her as a woman. And I think society can learn a lot, especially the space of GBV. We can learn so much from this case.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I want to just get final thoughts quickly from our panelists that are online, and then Dr. Bota, you'll close it off for us. Amanda, your final thoughts, Prof, on what we learned from this. I immediately think about now the issue of over and over again she's been asked, did you speak out and say you don't want this? And there's something to be said about what women need to then learn, and perhaps not just women, but even men, because Elton making an interesting point there, around needing to expressly say it, Prof.
Yes, and I want to say that people who are victims shouldn't be discouraged because of the secondary victimization. But what is important is that you keep a paper trail, right? So when you start to feel uncomfortable with behavior of a colleague or someone else, is to write it down. Every day, you write down what it is that made you feel uncomfortable. If there are emails or WhatsApps, you keep them. So that in the end, you know, there is evidence that this is not the behavior that you wanted, you didn't consent to it, even if you keep like a diary.
Yeah.
And I really think that is very important because in the end, because you will make the complaint, you will be the one that's going to be asked to answer questions.
Yeah.
But I also want to say to people, you have to make sure that when you take a job, what is the sexual harassment policy in that company or organization, and what is the grievance procedure that you can follow?
Yeah.
It's very often the state that fails, right? Government, Parliament. For the longest time, Parliament didn't have a sexual harassment policy. It was up to the parties to deal with sexual harassment. And we know of the examples coming out of the state. So make sure you know the policy and you know the grievance procedure when you apply for a job.
Yeah, very important. Thank you so much for that. And then, Alton, you can also give us your final thoughts. I think a great educational moment, as Ayanda has called it, has been in work environments, ensure that you have that policy. What do you think we should be taking from this moment, Alton?
One should look at it from this perspective. Of course, and I heard in her testimony, Ms. Mengo said that there's a possibility that her job conditions can be altered. And for me, if you sort of have play in that terrain, then she and the judge president, if you look at PRECA, because PRECA has now extended the definition of corruption, you can actually see that this can lead to something called sextortion, and they can be both guilty of that. So if you participate somehow, you can also be found guilty of that. That's one of the lessons that South Africans should take from this, to say, although you are a victim, there is another crime that's lying there in the wing under PRECA that you can be seen to be guilty of, a form of corruption, that you sort of have played along in order to maintain a certain benefit from the work, which is now termed sextortion. So that is the one thing. And here it is like what they look at in this inquiry, they look at what the victim's behavior, how she behaved, forgetting or maybe to a lesser extent looking at the actual perpetrator's behavior. And one should sort of have draw to say, listen here, this is the perpetrator's behavior, this is the sexual harassment policy, does it transgress that policy? And based on that, we deal with that there. With the victim's behavior, there can also be another corrective action taken there to say that if this happened, do not do this, and maybe deal with it, so that we can also deter victims from running away and speaking out. That's how I see it, how we can try and elevate. And I know it's difficult for victims to come up, but maybe we should sort of force them to actually say, do not engage in activities or actions that would seem to be consensual, but we know that you are coerced, you fear for reprisal, and there's an imbalance in power. So that we can try and maybe help them to change their mentality as to how they approach these things.
Alton, it's complex, Mr. Bota. It's a complex matter, what we've just heard from Alton. But what do we take from it?
Well, the sad thing, Naledi, is that it's not only the JP on trial or Ms. Mango and this on trial, it's the entire justice. the judiciary. And I hope that, for me, I hope that our Chief Justice, and I think in one of her interviews, she had said that the issues of, transformation, or I hope I'm not misquoting her, the issues of, issues of sexual harassment would be key. And this is an opportunity because it's not only JP, it's not only Andiswa. In fact, it's the system is on trial and is on trial in that what has been happening. How many magistrates who would know what constitutes sexual harassment? Judges. Notwithstanding the fact that a lot of judges, magistrates, and I speak from experience in my past work in organizations I've worked with, where they would tell you that, but we don't need training, we know it all. So for me, it's a golden opportunity for all of us and for the judiciary in particular to actually say, but you know what, there's much more we can do. And Chief Justice Maya has an opportunity. This is golden opportunity, but also private, public, because this, Naledi, it's widespread. It's widespread how women in senior, in junior, positions, what they go through daily, but for fear of reprisals, they don't speak out. So for me is that all of us are on trial, and it's what are we going to rise to the occasion and say, but look, can we grab it both hands? Both hands and say, but look, we're going to run with it. Sexual harassment is, in fact, a cancer in this country that more often than not, we actually don't think that it's so important.
Yeah. Thank you so much to our guests. This has been certainly an enlightening conversation. Thank you so much to Mr. Mbuyiselo Botha, the founder of the Men's Forum, Professor Amanda Gous, who is a feminist theorist and political science professor, Brenda Madumise, director of Wise for Africa, and Alton Hart, who is a legal expert, speaking to us this evening. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we are going to have a discussion around the land expropriation bill, which has just been signed into law by the president. Stay with us.